सेशन 4 डे 2
सेशन 4 नहीं है, ये सेशन 5 है।
सेशन 5 सॉरी इसमें सेशन 4 डाल दिया मैंने, कोई बात नहीं। सेशन 5
ये वाला 5 बी वाला
डे 2
डिस्क्रिप्शन भी, हाँ डिस्क्रिप्शन भी नीचे सेम ही है।
Thank you everyone. Now we begin with the second session of today. The session is titled Assertion and Negation of Identities. The session will be chaired by Professor Syed, Husain, Jafri. Professor Jafri has been head of Department of History, University of Delhi from 2007 to 2010. He has also served as Secretary of Indian History Congress from 2010 to 2015. He has also presided over sessional president of 44th annual session of Punjab History Congress in 2012 and the 77th annual session of Indian History Congress of 2016. He has to his credit many popular works like The Islamic Past, Politics in India, which was published in the year 2006. Other works include Beyond the Chronicle, recovering the histories of institution and family from documents of 17th and 18th century. It was published in the year 2021. The latest work includes Agrarian Society in Our Structure and Changes during pre-colonial regime. It was published in the year 2022. Some of his papers like Masnad of Fakr o Irshad, Tariq Wanda-e-Karimia, Nasir Salon, 2003. This paper was selected by the Urdu Academy for the Research Award. I welcome you, sir. We have the following three speakers for the session. Professor Arvind Sinha. He will be presenting on Coromandel weavers in the French settlement, clothing and furnishing materials for the foreign markets. The next speaker would be Professor Lamenting Bahuguna. He will be speaking on "We have nothing to do either with Musalmans or Hindus, the Bairagis in Mughal India." The last speaker would be Professor Syed Nadeem. The paper of his title is Emerging Identities and Practices of Lamenting Husain in Medieval India. Before I introduce the first speaker, I take a moment to introduce the first speaker, Professor Arvind Sinha. Professor Sinha was a professor at the Center of Historical Studies, JNU. He was also an associate in Euro-India project from 2003. He was also a fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library from 2005. His publications include The Politics of Trade, Anglo-French Commerce, on the Coromandel Coast, 1763-1793. And the most popular publications include Europe and Transition from Feudalism to Industrialization, which are published in 2010. I welcome you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks to Delhi University for inviting me to share some of my research experience with all of you. It's almost after 2 decades I have come and participated in lecture. I have taught here for a very long time, both in the college and also in the department, teaching French history, and today I met one or two of my old students also who had been the victims of my teaching. I also thank the energetic faculty members who have organized this seminar or the conference. It's a very tough job to organize it with a limited budget, and it has been going on very well. So I'm looking forward to making some kind of observations. although most of the people are familiar with the weavers and their migrations, etc. So I'll focus only on a few aspects of during this period. My topic, as you've already seen, is weavers in the French settlement. So I'm going to focus on from the title itself, you can see that I've worked on weavers in the French settlements, and the second part is dealing with the textiles. What kind of textiles they were making to be sent to all parts of Europe. So this is basically what I'm trying to convey. The importance of Indian textiles can be seen as early as in 1666 and 1670. Can we have the next slide? The first is by Molière, a very famous playwright in French, whose famous work, La Bourgeois Gentleman, it's basically a kind of a comedy which he has provided in this work. It's comedy because he's trying to, he's conveyed that how there is a distinction between the bourgeoisie and the nobility. And when the bourgeois is going to attend a function in the court, he is trying to be very smart, very up to date, etc., very fashionable. So he is wearing dresses which were of the Indian origin, basically shaped. So he looks a comical figure because what he is supposed to be wearing should be inside the doors, inside the home. Those are the dresses not to be worn outside because of this color and brightness and all that. So he made a fool of himself by going to the court, and everyone made fun of him. So in that context, he is talking of the Indian textiles. And this I found it very interesting because it is very pertinent to this topic which we are doing just now. And secondly, there is another work, another work by Pierre Jour, who Semaine, Burlesque, d'Amsterdam. This is again a parody. It's a very interesting, it's a long poem in which he has tried to fit all the names of the Indian textiles. And this was in 1666. This is the time when the Indian textiles reached the French market. And this is the time when people started admiring it. And that is why I have started with, can we go to the next slide? This is the song which this is the parody which he has written in the form of rhyming textile words in the entire work. So, so this in fact is, I'm not taking too much of time to translate all that because I can do that since in 20 minutes I have to convey a lot of things, and I'm a very indisciplined person as far as the lectures are concerned because I always exceed time. So that is why I'm trying to avoid as much as possible what I don't need to. So now to begin with, the textile production was the most commercialized sector of the Coromandel. In fact, if one wants to see that the different aspects of economy, it was the weaving sector, it was the textile sector, which was considered to be very popular, popular with the foreign companies, because Coromandel textiles were not very profitable as far as the percentage of profit is concerned, but it provided a steady profit all through, and the demand was in fact constant. In luxuries, the demand would fluctuate a lot, but in this case, the demand was constant. On the whole, Coromandel specialized in coarser variety of cloth, but that does not mean that they did not have the luxury items either.
Yes, sir. So it would be great if you could just hold the mic closer because the audio system.
So it was a very popular item, and the weavers producing these clothes, I would use the term producers. That is why the producers who had made such exquisite clothes, they earned global reputation. In fact, 17th and 18th centuries are the time when Indian textiles became so popular all around the world. And it touched on the four continents: Asia, Africa, the western parts of America, and Europe. I'll go into that slightly later. This presentation deals with factors which were responsible for the migration of weavers towards the French settlements. There are certain general points which I'll be mentioning, but specific points I'll be definitely taking up in case of the weavers attempt to come and settle in French colonies, French settlements. France was the last, French company was the last company, Design was the last company among the major powers to come to India. And in fact, the cotton was not grown in Europe for a very long, right till the beginning of the 17th century. Attempts were made to make the Indian cotton popular as early as in 1607, both by the English and the Dutch. But it was only in around 1650s and 60s that the cotton became a craze all of a sudden. So what were the reasons for it? I'll again take up a little later when I'm talking about the textiles. So my lecture is divided into two parts. One, I'm focusing on the weavers and the French settlements. And the second part, I'm going to focus on the nature of textiles, the type of textiles which found market abroad. And there was enough variations to suit the taste and the needs of different countries, different people, different types of people, etc. So from the extreme aristocratic people of Europe to the extreme poor people of Senegal and Guinea, it suited almost everyone. And most important, the price factor was also, the price factor of the Indian textiles was also a very important aspect of the exports of the textiles. So, talking of the markets particularly which found Indian textiles were East Asia, Persia and West Asia region, then Western Africa, Europe, many parts of Europe. But and I'll tell you why I'm not talking only of the French. I'm talking of Europe as general because the French were supplying textiles to different regions of Europe in competition to the English. And the most interesting aspect of the two is that English were very rigid in their selection of textiles. They would give modern and they would give sample pieces, and they wanted the weavers to produce textiles exactly on the same type. There was to be no variation, and the quality standard had to be maintained. As a result, they would reject a lot of clothes to the weavers, and the weavers would be starved absolutely if the clothes which they had made and is not purchased. So what the French people did, especially in the period of free trade, the private traders would go and buy them, they take it back to Europe, and they would be supplying those goods to different markets much earlier than the English would do. And this became a constant fiction. The English authorities, in fact, continuously complained to the Court of Directors that why the French are allowed to buy textiles which have been rejected by the English. So this is a very interesting aspect, and in fact, the textiles became a global trade. It was not confined to India or to Coromandel. It was a global trade, and the other regions were there. Bengal was there, but I'm not including Bengal because otherwise it would become too vast. And otherwise, too, Chandranagar was surrounded by the English from all sides. So as far as Chandranagar is concerned, its contribution was mainly at the will of the English. Whereas Coromandel had a very big advantage. It was a long coast, so there were a lot of outlets, settlements, etc. of different countries. The English, the French, the Dutch, the Danes, etc. So there was a mixed up. So they could work independently. So Pondicherry, Yanao and Karikal, these were the three important ports on the Coromandel coast, which the French benefited from there. My work is to a very large extent based on the French writings, especially by, I found this work of Flay extremely useful. Flay has written 2 volumes which he had presented to, he had plans of presenting it to Napoleon so that it would help in his invasion of India, but showing the value of India. So at times it is very highly exaggerated work as far as the Indian textiles are concerned, but the details which he has provided I did not find even in the English sources. Being an engineer who travelled to different parts of South India, he travelled in fact right up to Kashmir, but he has written in detail about the textile industry of South India, and especially the French. And in this he provides very interesting information about the textiles, the quality of textiles, the manufacturing process, the technology, etc., which made the work very interesting and very valuable. And I wish I could translate it because it's a huge work and it would take almost my life to complete the work. But I have used it in great detail. Another person who traveled to this region was Pierre Blanchard, who has written on the coast of India and China. He's basically compared the 2 regions, but in the process his work is so detailed that he has given the price of each commodity, of each variety of textile, the profit margin and all that. So it's very useful as far as the statistics is concerned. So this is another work, and there are a lot of memoirs which I found. Pierre Sodereth is another one, and a lot of memoirs which I found it mentioning in between it. They were basically related to political issues. The entire aim of the memoirs of the 18th century was how to oust the English and how the French political establishment could be set up there. So the focus was totally different. I tried to look for the lives and pattern of living of the weavers in French settlements, but unfortunately I did not find much. It was primarily the technology and primarily the production of textiles which remained the focus of all these visitors or writers in catalogs, etc. So these are some of the limitations which I did find. Coming back to the weavers, could you just tell me at what time I am supposed to finish? No, I don't want to take anyone else's time. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So 5 minutes, I'll give you a kind of a capsule. So what I was talking about the weavers, that there were weavers from different castes. It was a community which was based on caste. It had very strong solidarity, and all the weavers who moved from the temple towns to other regions, they were very they had a very strong solidarity and they moved together. We don't come across examples of individual weavers moving to another place. They moved together. And I am not going into details of anything because I have got so much of material on this, but I would definitely like to mention that why did they move out from one place to another? Why was there a migration? These were various reasons for it. First of all, any short-term calamity, whether it was famine or whether it was drought, or whether it was natural disaster, they would definitely, for the earning, they would be moving out. Apart from that, they also had a very sort of a clear-cut mind of where they would get the earning, where they would get a higher earning. So that was also the market forces also played a very important role in the migration of weavers. So they always moved to places which were closer to the distribution centers where their goods could be consumed or purchased by outsiders. Weavers never sold their goods themselves. It was always through agents or through merchants or various organizations through which their goods reached their destination. So from that point of view, another factor which was important was the political factor. Being a very strong and powerful group which enjoyed a particular status in the society, they had certain privileges which other groups did not have. So they looked to places where they would be respected if they move out. So that notion of privilege was another important aspect for which the weavers moved out. Besides this, I also found that the regions where the political authority was tyrannical, which interfered in their works, which taxed them heavily, they would not work in that region. And so the best solution was to move out from there. And since they had their instruments were very light, easy to carry, so in overnight they would decide in their meetings and they would leave for a new place. They had all contacts with the distant places. Although they stayed at one group, their close relations, it's a solidified group because the solidarity came from working together. So it was a culture of the weavers where they worked together, where they spent all the time. They had very close ties with their families because in the production process, these weavers, men folk would be weaving the cloth and the women and children would be spinning the cloth, preparing the yarn. So there was a continuous interaction. And one also knows that weavers had a very strong cultural traditions. They had an oral history in the form of songs, etc. Unlike today, where everyone has got everyone is enjoying mobile and music through that, and I've seen all elder people, farmers everywhere, that mobile keeps them engaged. So similarly, the weavers at that time, since they did not have that technology, they relied on their music, on their songs. And so the weavers' songs carried the tradition, and we get some information from those traditions. Now coming to their movement towards France, French settlements. In fact, the French settlements, especially Pondicherry, if one talks of, that was the main place where they moved, but there were other regions also. And secondly, Pondicherry was not confined to a very small town itself. There were a lot of villages around that. And not only villages, the towns around Pondicherry, for example, Sarpras, Porto Novo, Guadalupe, these were some of the towns which were greatly influenced by the French presence. And many of them were selling their products to the French. So in other words, French production was not confined. My goodness. So anyway, then
You can conclude and the
conclusion will take 15 minutes. I think I'll straight away jump to the second part. I'm not talking about the weavers in Pondicherry and the migration to Pondicherry, except just two sentences that the French offered them a lot of incentives in the form of they would give them loans up to 10 pagodas. That was a very big amount. And the English were cribbing about it. They were very upset that why the French are giving them so much of loans, etc. Because the French was basically a company and they could not take decisions in that way as the French were doing. and especially when the French was, the trade was carried out by the private traders, the French traders. So they were giving places to settle. In fact, in Pondicherry, you will come across certain streets which have shaded, which are shaded with trees. They have open spaces to prepare yarn. They have outside places in the houses where they would be weaving cloth. So these were the weaving lanes, weaving streets, which was extremely useful for the weavers. And they got a lot of other benefits. Taxation was low. I'll give one very interesting example that in 1732, when the English tried to induce the weavers, allure the weavers, they could not succeed because the competition between the French and the English, the French far exceeded them. And so, on one ground, they all migrated to Pondicherry because they were used to tobacco and betel. And the English were charging taxes on that. They had very heavy taxation on that. So they decided that in French and Dutch settlements, there is no taxation on betel and tobacco. So they would be very cheap. So they all migrated, overnight migration. They first gave a thread one day and next day they all migrated. So these are certain very interesting examples. Coming down to, I think I have to make my lecture into a capsule in 5 minutes, which are with me. Coming down to the type of textiles which were exported from India. And in fact, there were various varieties, Ganjam, Guinea. Guinea, in fact, I would like to mention that Guinea was a textile which were of two types. There were very fine Guineas and there were very rough types. The rough types reached West Africa and they became, in fact, they were so popular with the slave population. They were not slaves, but with the black population. That they started, in fact, transacting the business by the medium of exchange, and that medium of exchange was Indian textiles. So textiles became the medium of exchange in West Africa. And this was done, the French were carrying it because they needed gum for their clothing industry. So the gum was taken from this region, Senegal, etc. And in return, they were given Indian textiles. Similarly, the slaves of West Indies, they also used Indian textiles, the rough Indian textiles. The Persian region, in fact, because of the refinedness of the cloth and the thin threads which were there, because of the quality of thread, it was used as a veil or head covering, etc. So it had its market. Palampur, I'll just please. Yeah, this is one thing which I found in the microfilm. The process of making doria. This was the way how it was ultimately prepared. And doria was a kind of a muslin, very refined, very beautiful. And Coromandel did not make dorias of the quality of Bengal, but it had a ready-made market in very many parts of the world. These are also examples I have taken. These are the Roman, which were there. I think we have to move fast now. These are the dresses which were made out of Indian textiles, and these are the pictures which I have taken from the Museum of Pompidou and Loriot. So, just a second, backward. If you see on the left side top, these are the inner garments of women, which were made of Indian textiles. And in fact, the coming of the Indian textiles changed the entire pattern of their living, their appearance, etc. And the Indian textiles not only provided furnishing material, not only as a decorated item, but also various kinds of clothes from where, and especially in Europe. For example, Bussy, who was the governor of French settlement of Pondicherry, he purchased 12 pieces of ginning, which was very beautiful, for Madame de Pompadour. You must have heard the name of a very notorious figure or a very popular figure in France before the revolution. So he sent 12 pieces of that. Similarly, neckties, etc., they were gifted by the Europeans to their friends. So Indian textiles, even with all prohibitions which were there against the import of printed material, these commodities found market, and there are certain examples that the shopkeeper knew about those prohibitions, yet he was selling it through underhand means. And there was a smuggled market of the smuggled goods which existed in France even at the time of French Revolution. These are all pieces of calico. And you find the patterns existing even till date. So more than 200 years, and the pattern, in fact, are still living. These are again patterns which were not typically Indian, but it was on the demand of the Europeans that these patterns were created to suit their interest, to suit their taste. So weavers were able enough to change their patterns, to change their the decoration motifs, etc., according to the demand of the Europeans or outside world. These are again these are called chemise, the ladies' blouses or short frocks. Yeah. These are again gowns which were supposed to be worn inside the house, and this is what I was talking of when in bourgeois gentlemen. These are the type of gowns which were supposed to be worn indoors, but that bourgeois man who was going to the court was wearing it outside. He was going to the court and wearing all that. So he looked very funny for the people. But the importance of Indian textile still persists. Yeah. These again the skirts which you find that Europeans and every aristocratic woman took pride in keeping at least 2 to 3 pieces of Indian textiles as a kind of a fashion. You can see the bed covers made of Indian textiles, and these were of the not ordinary people; they were all families of the nobility. This is Palampur, which actually is Anglo-Persian word which derived from the word Palamposh. Palamposh. From Palamposh, it became for the Europeans Palampur. This was a very popular commodity which was used for furnishing, for tents, tent curtains, for bed covers, chair covers, all kinds of furnishings. And similarly, it was also used for dresses, men and women's dresses. This is a typical display, and the importance of this Palampur is that it was totally representing nature. It had all aspects of nature, whether it's a tree or whether leaves, all the motifs are made of that, or the birds, or the flowers. So everything they represented nature. This is again the peacocks, etc. This was a very popular motif and was very popular in Persian region. Yeah. This is a change which came about with the European demands. And I'll finish off with these are the handkerchiefs. These are the handkerchiefs which were quite large, could be used for various reasons. And this had the ready-made market. This was the most sold item across the continents. So whether in the slaves or whether in Europe. So these were called mouchoirs in French. So the mouchoir was the most popular item among all the textiles, apart from the calicos. These are the models which were used for printing the textiles. You are depriving the audience of such lovely pictures. These are the English designs with English textiles which they started copying Indians. they came to be known as Indinash. Indinash was the textile which was produced in different cities of Europe. And in fact, they replaced the Indian textiles because on the one side prohibitions, on the other side the mass production, because Indian textiles were handmade. So these were the mass production textiles, and they set up factories at different places. So I'll finish with this, and I'll conclude by just in 2 minutes. I'll conclude in 2 minutes that when we talk of the weavers and their opportunities of going to the coastal towns, the European coastal towns, then I find a kind of a dilemma here. On the one side, the weavers, in the hope of getting better deal, getting better benefits, profits, etc., moved to these coastal towns, and there was a choice between various European companies, but the choice was basically between the English and the French. Lot of weavers, in fact, enjoyed the spaces provided by the French settlements. In the French settlements, they were given all kinds of benefits. But the French company became so weak after the abolition. It was abolished in 1769, and it became a free trade. The trade was carried out by the free traders, and then again the company was set up in 1785 and again abolished in 1791. So during these various fluctuations of the French fortune and the continuous wars, the weavers were forced to leave French settlements and go to other places. This was one problem. But the real problem was that the English, because of the weakness of the French, established their complete domination over the weavers. And the weavers began to lose their independence. And that is why, in fact, the weavers did not find an alternative to go from the English companies. They tried in 1784 to 86. They went to Courtlourde because the French settlement was in very poor shape. They went to Courtlourde, and the English exerted authority on the Nawab of Karnataka to oust them, not to allow them. And so they prohibited, he issued orders that the weavers could not manufacture textiles for the French. And they were later forced to leave that region and go back to the English settlements. So I'll conclude with that. Extra time. But I have mentioned right in the beginning that I have very difficult question.
Thank you, sir. And you also apologize that we have to interview again and give you a lecture. That was very enthusiasm, and you have highlighted the question of assertion and negation and both the clash and the identities. Now I would like to invite next speaker, Professor Bahuguna. As mentioned earlier, he would be speaking on we have nothing to do either with the Musalmans or Hindus, the Bairagis in rural India. Professor taught at the Department of History and Culture, Jamia Millia Islamia. He was also the head of department at the university. He did his post-graduation in history with specialization in medieval Indian history from the Center of Historical Studies, JNU. He did PhD from Delhi University. His PhD area of interest lies in the study of interaction between Mughal, medieval sheikhs and Sufism, history of religious movements, comparative religion and evolution of pattern of intolerance and conflicts in India's religious tradition. He has published many research papers on the above mentioned themes, like his co-edited work, Negotiating Religion, Perspectives of Indian History, which was published in the year 2012. His other work includes Revisiting History of Rajasthan, essays from Professor Rezavi, which was published in the year 2017. The other works include Configuration Historical Landscape of Rajasthan, published in the year 2022. So I would like to invite Sir.
I hope I abide by the time. Thank you very much. And in particular, I would like to thank Professor Sinha and our colleagues in the Department of History for inviting me here today and speak on the theme that I have chosen. Like Professor Arvind Sinha, I have also been associated with the department for a very long time. I in fact spent first part of my teaching career in Delhi University, taught at Motilal Nehru College, also took postgraduate classes in the department for a very long time, and then did my PhD from the department with Professor Arvind, and later was later worked here as a UGC postdoctoral fellow, and was also part of in the 1990s and early 2000s was part of those great exercises on revision of syllabus. Used to fight a lot, and but every Thursday used to the day for meetings to revise the syllabus. So I'm happy, but it also gives a feeling of, also creates a feeling of sadness that 3 of those friends were associated with the department and were very close to me also are no longer with us today. I'm talking about Krishnamapati, Sunil and Rezavi. So difficult to think of the department without them. And they all, went before they could even retire. In fact, when I was going to retire from Jamia about 5 months ago, Professor Venkat Subramaniam, who taught in this department for a very long time, said, Bahuguna, be careful. Just be careful, you are going to retire. So anyway, I am very much here before you. So I didn't scare Professor Amar. But I'm sure this feeling must have crossed your mind also. So here we are. The part of the title of the paper, which is in scarce quotes, is from the English translation of Rajasthani Mazaib. Professor Jafri would have read it up by now. So I am making this presentation on the Bairagis, and at the outset, one may question the wisdom of reading a paper on a theme which is well covered in modern historical writings. You have in the works of Richard Burgard, Peter Vanderveer, Purushottam Agrawal, and then William Pinch. You have a lot of work done on the Bairagis. So what new am I going to say today? I feel that I was struck by the fact that during the course of my research on other themes, I was struck by the fact that the term Bairagi comes to be used recurrently in the sources, both in the Persian sources and in the vernacular sources. And one should not confuse it with Sanskrit terms such as Virak or Vairagya. And usually historians have translated it as, the English translation that is given is ascetic or mendicant. But actually what happened in the course of the 17th century, an entire community emerged, the Bairagi community. And then I tried to explore the stages through which the community passed in the course of the 17th century and early 18th century. And it is my argument that today's Ramanandi community or the Bairagis, who are treated synonymously with Ramanandis are very different from the 17th century Bairagis. So today, they are part of the political and religious processes of polarization. And you know what kind of statements are given on daily basis. But what I have tried to do is to see how the community shaped in the 17th century, how it grew, how it meant different things, and how then ultimately it was transformed, marginalized, and disciplined. So, in a way, I have worked on a period which William Pinch has not explored. Particularly, the anti-state potential of the community, and how the community passed through. Okay. So, roughly from the third decade of the 17th century, we come across increasing use of the term Bairagi in the Indo-Persian and vernacular sources to broadly indicate a Vaishnava community. If you look at the travelogues, Sufi, Santik and Vaishnava hagiographic texts, works on comparative religion like Davistan and Mazaib, Persian histories of Aurangzeb's reign, and I have in mind all the major works like Saki Mustad Khan's Masri Al-Biri, then Ishwadas Nagar's work, Abd Khan's works, and other works. Jaipur state records of the early 18th century, in particular the Kapatwara documents, they describe in varying ways the religious ideas, practices, social attitudes, social composition, rebellious activities, suppression, and finally the disciplining and marginalization of the Bairagis. If we move chronologically and trace the journey of the term as used in a wide range of sources over a period of about 100 years, roughly from the middle of the 17th century to the middle of the 18th century, we get a fascinating picture of the growth and transformation of the Bairagi community. Before I narrate this tale, it is important before I narrate this entire tale, how this community developed and passed through the sources that are somewhat unrelated, it is important to see the connection between Ramanandis and the Bairagis. If you look at most of the modern writings, they tend to use these two categories synonymously. For instance, if you look at Purushottam Agrawal's work on Kabir, he has done excellent work on Ramanand, and he has blasted many myths about Ramanand. But he also argues that there was no difference between the Bairagis and Ramanandis were the same. So it's important to know who the Ramanandis were in the 17th century, and then what is the connection between the Bairagis and the Ramanandis. So in the course of the 16th century, monasteries were established by the followers of Ramanand at places like Galta, Ravasa, Chitrakoot, and other places. The first two places are important. They were in the Kachwaha estate of Amer, Jaipur, and Galta in fact is very close to the modern city of Jaipur, and Ravasa is in the Sikar district. And in both places you have important Ramanandi monasteries. By the turn of the 17th century, the monasteries had developed an organizational setup that celibate Brahmin monks headed. Still, they remained open to the followers, lay followers like peasants, artisans, and women. Many of them were the followers of Kabir and other lower caste sons as well. Two famous Vaishnava hagiographers, Navadas and Antas, lived at the Galta and Ravasa monasteries respectively during the last decades of Akbar's reign. While Navadas composed the famous Bhaktimal, Anantas composed the Parchais of Kabir and other lower caste sons. Given the fact that a large number of Ramanand's followers still gave pride of place to Kabir in their social religious worldview, Richard Bogart has argued that the Ramanandis brought about a minor social revolution in North India. Jati Pati Puchi nahi koi hai, jo bhaje so hanja hoi. The Ramanandis lived in the towns, villages, monasteries and pilgrimage centers of North India. They moved from one region to the other and from one Santik religious fraternity to the other. They related themselves to Ramanand through Kabir and other lower caste sons. So, in fact, the people that we call Ramanandis were actually followers of Kabir, Namdev and Rezavi. Ramanand came to them through Kabir. So actually they were the followers of these sons. And then only at a later stage, through this genealogical arrangement, they came to be called Ramanandis. And it is these lower caste followers of Kabir and other early sons of the formative phase, it is these people who are the fulcrum of early Bairagi community, as it began to take shape at the beginning of the 17th century. In the 17th century, these lower caste followers of Ramanand and Kabir formed the major part of the Bairagi community. Many other groups that sprang from Sant movement, such as Saaths, Satnamis, Dadupanthis, Lal Dasis, also came under the Bairagi fold. So those among the Bairagis who got their hair shaped were called Mundias, as the Davistan says. Davistan author clearly says that the Bairagis are also called Mundias, people who get their hair shaped. So the literal meaning of Mundia, if you look at Jadran's history of politics, is shaveling, the people who remove the hair. Bairagi was an umbrella term that covered itinerant Ramanandis for whom Kabir was the central figure and who were followers of other early sons and who visited pilgrimage centers. So it's very clear. I mean, the mistake that has been, I think, committed in my view by other historians is that for them all Ramanandis were Bairagis. In my opinion, in the beginning, only the lower caste followers and the followers of Kabir and other lower caste sons who were related to Ramanand in one way or the other were the Ramanandis. Not all Ramanandis were Bairagis, and not all Bairagis were Ramanandis. That should be made very clear, because the Bairagis were recruited from other sources as well, from other Vaishnava sampradayas and other Vaishnava communities, and that becomes very clear from the account given by Mohabbat in his Tabistani Mazail. So you have all these groups constituting what we call the Bairagis. Now, in the course of the 17th century, the Bairagis first enter the written records variously as pilgrims visiting Vaishnava shrines and monasteries. Mahmud Balki, when he visited India during the end of Jahangir's reign, informs us how he traveled with the Bairagis and informs us about their ideas and how they were very, very liberal-minded, how they helped him in difficult situations. So it's possible that, he says that the chief of the Gorakhnathi Jogis at Gor Khatri near Peshawar made many Bairagis his disciples. He also makes a clear distinction between Bairagis and other Vaishnava preachers. He traveled with two Bairagis to various shrines and describes how they saved him when he was struck by lightning and how they, and I quote him, hastened to extinguish the extensive fire burning in my soul. Unquote. At this stage, the Bairagis were perhaps traveling singers singing songs of bhakti, particularly those of Kabir, Namdev, Rezavi, as they passed from one Vaishnava shrine or monastery to another. And here I think the role of the establishment and consolidation of Mughal Empire is very, very important, because the Bairagi community could not have emerged without the formation, expansion, and consolidation of the Mughal Empire, because they created conditions for travelers, for traders, for musicians to travel from one place to the other, and we find people traveling all across in North India to various pilgrimage centers, to shrines, and to temples. The term Bairagi also begins to enter Dadupanthi hagiography towards the third decade of the 17th century. And in Dadu's biography, which is called Dadu Janmu Leela Parchi, written by his first generation disciple Jangopal, we get many references to the Bairagi followers of Dadu Panth. So much so that he even calls Dadu himself a Bairagi. And Bairagi does not mean here ascetic. I think Vinan Kelavert is wrong in translating the term Bairagi as ascetic or mendicant, because by the time the community was formed, its followers were called Bairagis. So just translating the term is not sufficient. One has to see the larger ramifications of the use of the term. And in fact, we are told, for instance, we are told that in this particular text there is a long chapter on Dadu visiting Fatehpur Sikri and sermonizing Akbar for almost 40 days. So it's a hagiographic text, and then Akbar tries to lure him with wealth, property, etc., etc. But the hagiographer says, Dadu was not influenced at all because he was a great Bairagi. And this Akbar says, he makes Akbar say, Dadu is a great Bairagi. And one element of being Bairagi is to be fearless. Not just that you have to give up Maya or you are not influenced by wealth and property, but you have to be fearless. And that's the reason why the Santik utterances of this time, the Sant Vanis, and in the hagiographic text, the term Sant Shurma, the Sant warrior, and another term, Sant Sipai, they appear very, very recurrently from this time onwards. This shows the gradual growth of militant ideology among the Bairagis. And although later Saki Mustaq Khan, writing towards the end of the century, says that the Mundias who revolted at Narnaul were not properly armed, and still they fought the Mughal army. It's clear that gradually, an ideology was developing, which in course of time led to the growth of military culture among the Bairagis. Now, by and large, it is argued that this happened because they had to fight with the Shaivite Naga sadhus, particularly for the control of shrines, pilgrimage centers, precedents at the time of taking bath on the occasion of Kumbh Mela in Hadwar, for patronage, etc., etc., which is true. I would not deny that, but at the same time, I think it's very important to know that this is not all about the Bairagis. They were not merely the rivals of the Shaivite sannyasis. They are something more than that, and that will come out in the next two sections that I shall deal with now. So now then we come to the middle of the century, and we have now the Bairagis come into full historical view. They come into full view of history in Dabistani Madhab. Perhaps no other work devotes so much space to them as the Dabistan does. In any case, I think the author of Dabistan is also fascinated because he himself was one whose religious worldview was similar to those of the Bairagis. And the work is unique because its author, as Professor Atharali has said, if you ask what his identity was, whether he was a Muslim or a Parsi, then it would not have interested him, because it was not important to him as to what his religious identity was. He excelled when he discussed groups which crossed boundaries, which subverted the boundaries of religion, so in this sense, if you look at his description of the Bairagi community, it emerges to be some sort of a liminal community, which becomes very clear because that was their own description actually. This is what they say.
I'll quote from the Dabistani Mazahib. It says that in Hindustan, yes, it's a unique work which was completed around 1653. All dimensions of the Bairagi, Firqa and Taiba come into sharp focus in the work. It includes Kabir, Namdev, Kabir and Namdev in the category of Bairagis, though not yet Ramanand. Dabistan also says that Bairagis call themselves Vaishnavas and the name of Vishnu suffices for salvation and that they have nothing to do with Hindus and Musalmans. A great number of Musalmans became Bairagis. He mentions a few names, few Muslim names who became Bairagis. Then he comes to one person whose name was Tera Kerwan, who was among the accomplished saints and showed himself in the dress of every sect. And he also showed himself as a Bairagi. Branding of the body with hot iron by the Bairagis is also mentioned. Dabistan also says that Kabir, a weaver by birth, celebrated among those Hindus who professed their belief in unity of God, was a Bairagi. So, unity of God is very important. So, what kind of Vaishnavism it was? It was not the Vaishnavism of Pushtimark or Gaudiya Sampradaya or upper caste Ramanandis. It was a Vaishnavism. It was a sort of open Vaishnavism, as some scholars have argued, where the distinction between Nirgun and Sagun was completely obliterated, subverted. So the question of worship of whether you are a worshipper of formless God or God with incarnation did not matter at all. So that is why they say we are neither Hindus nor Musalmans. This was the situation. Dabistan does not use the term Bairagi for Ramanand and the Ramanandi. In fact, contrary to what Purushottam Agarwal has argued, I would say that he makes a clear distinction between the Ramanandis and Bairagis, although he does put many Ramanandis in the category of Bairagis. But he is very clear, he treats Ramanandis separately. In fact, he does not treat Ramanandis when he is discussing the Bairagis separately. Now, Ramanandis have already been discussed, and then a separate section is devoted to the Bairagis, where he says that there are many Ramanandis who are also Bairagis. So, in fact, when he takes Ramanand's name, he calls him Brahmin Ramanand, who never saw the face of a Musalman and could not converse with a weaver. But ultimately, he took Kabir into his arms. So it is clear that Mubad did not call Ramananda Bairagi, but it is also clear that despite the Brahminical identity, Ramananda's radical or liberal image was taking shape. And later on, Miratul Asra, a Sufi text of the second half of the 17th century, I hesitate to speak much about it because Professor Jafri is an expert on Sufism, and Miratul Asrar was written by a Sufi who belonged to his own region. So it was an Awas Sufi, Abdul Rahman Chishti, wrote this important text, and he says that Ramananda was a Bairagi. So first Dadu came to be identified as a Bairagi, and since Dadu was a follower of Kabir, then Kabir became a Bairagi, and then ultimately Ramanand became a Bairagi. So this is the way the process of appropriation occurred. And there are many other texts. I'm just because there is no time. Otherwise, there are many other Sufi works where there are detailed accounts of various Bairagis, including Muslim Bairagis, and who clearly say that they are neither Hindus nor Muslims. And about one Bairagi, it was said that he used to live in a mosque and in Sambal, and he did hard ascetic exercises, but did not believe in Tawhid, but was a man of truth. And this is the image of Kabir that is developing in much of the Sufi hagiography. Now the state's problem with the rebels, with the people who revolted in 1672 in the area of Narnaul was precisely this. Why do these people say that they are neither Hindus nor Muslims? That was one problem. Ishwadas Nagar, the Brahmin author of one of the histories, says that one reason why they are being punished is because they do not make any distinction between Hindus and Muslims. And then tells us how large number of people from among peasants, artisans, carpenters, etc. Become their followers. So, in fact, I am surprised that much of the historiography of the Satnami rebellion calls it a Satnami rebellion. Jagannath Sarkar started this process in his history of Bahuguna, separate section of Satnami rebellion. Then Cantwell Smith also did the same, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, saying that it was a kind of lower class rebellion. In Prof. Arvind's book, Agrarian System, in the last chapter, he does say that they were, the Satnamis were a sect, quote unquote, of Bairagis. However, if you look at various accounts of this rebellion, I think only 2 of them have used the word Satnami. And even those who have used the word Satnami also say that they were also called Mundiyas. And it is clear that Mundiyas are Bairagis. So it was a Bairagi rebellion actually. And some of these primary sources do tell us that they were Bairagis, they were a sect of Bairagis. So as I said, all these were subsumed under the category of Bairagi. Satnamis, Saats, Satnamis, Udadasis, Dadupanthis, Ramanandis, they all were part of it. So I think that is what was happening. And throughout the second half of the 17th century, we find the state, either the Rajput state, particularly the Kachwa state, or the Mughal state, sending troops against them. And they were scattered all over in this region, which I would call Eastern Rajasthan, Dhundar, Mewar, part of Mewar, then the Dhundar region, which is Eastern Rajasthan, going right up to Sikkim. Because this was the region of North India where the Bairagis were very strong. They had a popular base, and they drew their support base from peasants, landless laborers, and artisans. Most likely, one of the chroniclers says goldsmiths, but it makes sense to say that there must have been a large number of ironsmiths, because the area was known for ironworks. So this was the situation when S.Z.H became the ruler of Amir in 1700. And then I have explained in this paper what measures were introduced by S.Z.H to demilitarize the Bairagis and other communities, religious communities that were carrying arms. How he tried to tell the Ramanandis, the conservative Ramanandis, to evict the Bairagis from their fold. They were also told to make a clear distinction between Hindus and Muslims. There is a large number of documents called Sammati Patrams, which are part of Kapat Dwara documents, where there are many deeds of agreement where the Ramanandis, the Ladasis, the Bairagis, the Dadupanthis have to agree that they would follow the norms of Shastric Vaishnavism or Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And another thing that happened, was that another development that took place was a clear, separation between those Ramanandis who drew inspiration from the lives of Kabir and lower castes. And it was made very clear that in the Ramanandi community, you have to trace your genealogy to the upper caste disciples of Ramana, not to the lower caste disciples of Ramana. So that was the beginning of the eviction of Kabir and other lower caste sons from the Ramanandi order, which in course of time acquired a conservative character. After that, the story you know, William Pinch has also discussed it. Peter Vanderbilt has also talked about it. So how in the colonial period, in the early colonial period, they were further marginalized, they were forbidden from carrying arms. They were asked to behave as a proper Hindu religious sect and became part of the Hindu religion. So just read out this passage. Roughly from the middle of the 18th century, this is the concluding part, Ayodhya also began to emerge into prominence as a center of Ramite Vaishnavism, and Ramanandis played central role in this process. The formation of the Awadh Nawabi kingdom, with its capital at Faizabad, also contributed to the growing reputation of Ayodhya as a pilgrimage center. The Awadh Nawabs and their Hindu nobles patronized temple building activities in Ayodhya, but the Dasnavi Shaivite monks and their armed bands continued to pose serious threat to the Bairagis and their monasteries and centers of influence. In the face of growing attacks by the armed ascetics of the Shaivite orders on the Vaishnava pilgrimage centers, a Rajput Ramanandi monk from Jaipur named Balanand convened a meeting of all the four Vaishnava Sampradayas. But by now, although there were lower caste followers in the Ramanandi order, their entry was not forbidden. They still joined the ranks, but gradually the influence of Kabir and other lower caste sons waned, and Ramanandi order became a conservative order. And although the Bairagis continued to wield arms, particularly the Rajput Bairagis, then during the British period, early British period, as you know, I think during the time of Warren Hastings, they were further marginalized, they were pacified, they were forbidden from carrying arms, like it was done in the case of the Dasnami Sadhus, and they just became a variant within Hinduism. As for instance, Wilson would say in Hindu religious sects that they are a sect within Hinduism, a kind of Protestant sect. So I would like to conclude.
Thank you, sir, and how beautifully you have touched upon the concept of negation and identity. Now I would like to welcome the next speaker, the last speaker, Professor Syed Nadeem. He will be presenting on emerging identities and practices of Lamenting Husain in medieval India. Professor Rezavi is a professor at Center of Advanced Studies, Department of History, AIM, since 2008. He was also a fellow at Shia Institute, Bahuguna, London, since 2016. In addition, he was also selected as Indian Charge Credit Fellow at the Center of South Asian Studies, School of Oriental and African Studies, for year 2007. He has many published works, including like the Patpur Sikri which was published in 2013. His edited works include History through Archaeology, published in 2019, and Tasveer-i-Peer Hasud, Tally of Surat Pen, published in 2017. I welcome you.
Please settle
the respected chair, my friend Arvind Saab, Bahuguna ji, my senior Professor lot many of my friends sitting here, and of course the young students of the university. I am really very thankful to the Department of History, Delhi University, for having invited me over to the 100-year celebrations, although I am not at all related with your university or your department. I mean, since yesterday I have been hearing almost all these speakers telling about their connections with the Department of History. My only connection with the Department of History at the moment is that my younger daughter has offered history in her BA, but not in the department in Coromandel College. That is the only, which is, my connection. However, there are a lot of important works which have been published from the University of Delhi History Department, which naturally as students and then as teachers we went through. And those works include not only works on ancient and modern India, but also certain works which were quite crucially important for the study of medieval India. Although I come from a center which is known for medieval Indian studies, but there are certain, great scholars of medieval Indian history which have been produced and were connected with the Department of History, University of Delhi. And today, as I take up this mic to speak today, I pay my tribute to each and every one of them. In fact, since today morning we have been hearing about the weavers, mendicants, the yogis, the Bairagis, but I would like to take you to something different, and that is emerging identities and practices of lamenting Husain in medieval India. I mean, this is something which in popular understanding is thought that the Shi'i community within the Muslims became prominent and came into their own only during the late 18th or 19th century. And there are two places which are actually associated with this development, the Yaman as well as Murshidabad, Bengal, and of course Bijapur and Gurgaon. And all these places are those places which are in their turn related with the Iranians. And so one popular perception has been that as a community, the Shias came into their own only after the decline of the Mughal Empire. And secondly, that their structures which were devoted to their activities, the Mambadas, were also something which, number one, developed during the 19th century generally, and number two, that they were actually derived and copies of those which had been found in Iran. My paper, this is one of the themes which I have started with a number of years back, and I have presented a number of papers devoted to this theme, and I am actually still in the process of developing it. To these students who are sitting here, I would recommend that in the Studies in People's History, Volume 4, number 1, the first of the series of this article, the State, Shias and Shiism in Medieval India, has been published. Before that, there was another paper, the Shia Muslims, religious movements and institutions in medieval India, which was published in a volume edited by Professor J.S. Greva. And that was published way back in 2006. So intermittently from 2006 till date, I have been working on this thing. Not constantly, but I would pick up one point here and then forget about it, and after a few years I would pick up some other strain of that theme at a later date. But today I would be trying to not take much of your time, although if you go by my presentation, my slides, all those from Aligarh know me that I also, just like my friend Arvind, do not stop when the mic comes in my hand. But I promise that because I am also quite tired after listening to papers since morning, and I can understand what's happened to you as well. So I would try to be as brief as possible and would be only giving you certain important things which I think that being in Delhi you should be aware. Generally the impression which I talked about that the Shias as a community did not develop under the Mughals is based on one thing, and that is that almost all the primary Mughal sources, that is those sources which were written during the period of the Mughals in Persian, generally the belief is that they do not mention any Shi religious activity. They might be mentioning a few names whom they allege that perhaps they were the Shias, but to substantiate their point, what were the practices as a community which this community was performing, there would be no reference in any of the primary sources written, composed, compiled during the classical Mughal period in Persia. This is the general belief. Although on the other hand, if you look at the travelogues, whether they are of the Portuguese or the English or even the Arab travelers who come to India, there we do find a mention of certain activities which show that there was a community which was different from the Hanafi Sunni community which was dominated in the Indian subcontinent. I tried to revisit these sources, and after revisiting these sources, I came to the conclusion that perhaps we were searching for certain things without paying attention to the changed terminology. For example, those of you who know about the Shias, they know that their lamentation ceremony today is known as Majlis. Majlis is any assembly. And the term Majlis does occur in the sources, but assemblies which were being held for any type of work, whether it is in the Sufi silsilas, whether the Majlis is a political one or a religious one, whether related with the theologians of this order or that order, any assembly where certain things were discussed were known as Majlis, and thus the term Majlis as understood today is very different. But did the term or did such type of assemblies take place during the medieval period? Because there was no such reference associated with the term Majlis in any of the sources, everyone concluded that no, the Mughals were suppressing the Shiites and thus nothing was happening. In fact, what I start getting is that there's a different term which has been used. Taskir. Taskir is the term. Once again, it is a term which is used for a number of type of things. But then we have the specific reference of Minhajus Siraj, who says that he would indulge in taskir means taskira, to narrate something. So taskir virtually would be narration of any incident, not necessarily lamenting Imam Husain. But then he points out that, I deliver these taskirs on a number of occasions, and one of the occasions which he mentions is the Ashrae Muharram, the first 10 days of Muharram, in which then he goes on to specify that this is the period that when during the taskirs he narrates the incidents of Karbala, whatever happened in the camp of Imam Husain at Karbala, at the hands of the army of Yazid. Number two, he does not talk about only the imperial cities. He talks about giving such taskirs even in military camps and in subsidiary towns. So perhaps even from Tabaqat-e Nasri, if you look at some of the evidences which I have given to you, that the lamentation of Imam Husain, the assembly where the mourning was taking place, market Tabaqat-e Nasri is writing about the time, which is the time of Sultan Iltutmish, the beginning of the Delhi Sultanate. And he's talking about lamentations taking place not only in Delhi and the central places, but also in regions like Gwalior. Then, another thing which has been told to us by the general historians of medieval India, which includes one of my very highly respected historians from Aligarh, Professor Syed Rezavi, and others, and that is that there was much persecution of the Shiites, especially during the period of the Tughlaqs. Firoz Shah Tughlaq is supposed to be one of those persons who persecuted not only the Sunnis, the Hindus, but also the Shias. Now it is during this period that we find that, Ibn Battuta, in fact, comes to India and he mentions Muharram as one of the prominent festivals along with the Eid. Number two, around the same period, when it is said that the constitution of the Shias are taking place, there is a Sufi saint, Syed Muhammad Ashraf Jahangir Simnani, who comes to India and he comes along with the alam, which is a symbol of the Shias today. So mark it that whether it is the reference of Tabaqat-e Nasri, whether it is Jahangir Simnani, whether it is the reference of Ibn Battuta, they are not talking about these practices being confined to the Shia community, but they are talking about these things happening amongst the Muslims of all varieties at this particular moment of time. Jahangir Simnani is not a Shia. He is a Sufi. But he brings something which ultimately ended up being the symbol of a particular community by the time that Mughals come into this. The Majlis is concretized by the time of the Nawabs of Awadh into something which belongs particularly to the Shia community. It's having origins which do not belong. I mean, there is, we talk about a Ganga everything. An intermingling of all together. And that is what we start finding as far as the commemorations and celebrations of Muharram. Another issue which I have taken, and I have been given I think 3 minutes back, there's 5 minutes are left. So, so I'll hurry up. And that is that perhaps you might have heard the term Tazia. Tazia is a symbol, a replica of wood or paper or any material which is supposed to represent the tomb of Imam Hussain in India. And it is said, Bairagis the Shia ceremony है तो ईरान से आई हो, must have been derived from Iran. In Iran, yes, there was Tazia, but in Iran, what I try to argue is that in Iran, Tazia meant a performance, a drama, where a performance was enacted to show what happened. And it is also said that the Iranian drama, theatre, in fact, develops from the Tazia, right? But in India, it does come, and it is said that Temur came in India with this Tazia. In fact, my father, who was a theologian and was writing on this theme, he wrote a Tarikh-e-Azadari, and he got confused, and he said that Temur brought this Tazia which is before us. Tazia, actually, in the form which is known in India, was never brought by Temur. Tazia also has another meaning, something which you honor and to which you pay your obeisances. Taziyat dena, where because if you go to someone whose father had died, we say that Taziyat ke liye, to remember honoring someone who's dead. So I don't have time, but then there is also a Farman of Aurangzeb which talks about Temur's Tazia, and that is the rumal and handkerchief which was associated with the martyrs of Karbala. So it was something which was related, and it was on occasions till date in Hyderabad, that particular handkerchief is now encased into an alum, and it is brought out on a day. So what Temur had brought to India was just a symbol, nothing else. Jahangir Simnani, I just mentioned, brought the alam. Today, the alams are taken out in procession. But the earliest references which we find when Jahangir Simnani is mentioned, that the alam was fixed in his takiya. Takiya means the place where he used to sit. Now, from this Bijapur, Jahangir Simnani came during the Tughlaq period. This is also very close in time, but from Bijapur, not from North India. But you look at, this is the takiya of a Sufi saint, where a Sufi is sitting, white beard, long hairs, white beard, and then the alams are fixed. They are fixed on the takiya of. Perhaps this was how for the first time, and this continued up till the company paintings, which were made during the 19th century. And in fact, if you go to my hometown in eastern Uttar Pradesh, till date during the Mughal, the alams are fixed in the same fashion as we find in that a painting dating back to 15th century. So what I am trying to point out, these are certain of the images which show the enactment of the drama Taziye in Iran. Even there is another thing which, and perhaps on this I would end. I won't go further because if I click, then I would start speaking once. The Mullah Abdul Qadir Bairagis is generally taken to be a man who hates the Shias. I mean,
fact, he hates both Hindus and Shias. You know, there is a person of Shia origin when he dies, so he says that he died the death of a pet. So this is the first step. I mean, this is one of the ways in which the modern historians have interpreted it, and it is actually not bad. I mean, this story is not that simple. Still, you know, Abdul Qadir Badawi, in his Muntakhabut Tawarikh, supposedly a man who is against the Shia mentions that in Delhi during Mughals, there is Marsiya Khwani, elegies being recited at various places, and he gives the name of a Marsiya Khwan. A specific name is given and an example of his Marsiya. Marsiya is any lamenting. Amir Khusro is also said to have said Marsiyas. But the type of verses which Mullah Abdul Qadir Badawi gives in his Muntakha shows that those verses are actually the Marsiya in the same fashion as the Marsiyas of Miradis during the 19th century. Now, one of the other things which, and then I go on to other things, I'll just skip them. All these ceremonies, there were certain assigned spaces where these were taking place. Ma'arik was a term used by Mullah Abdul Qadir Badawi. We do find a ma'arik in Kashmir dating back to the pre-Mughal period. The site is there, the reference is there. Actually, when the first commander of the Mughal army went to conquer Kashmir, he got the original structure demolished, and it is there that he is mentioning that this ma'arik was a place where the commemorations of Mughal were taking place. That ma'arik still exists in Zadiba in Kashmir. But then in Delhi itself, the Tughlaq period, the period supposedly the period when persecution was taking place, but also the period when Alam was introduced into the Indian subcontinent, just in front of the New Delhi railway station, there still exists this Tughlaq Imambara in the Bahuguna. The shape of this Imambara, intact has actually worked hard on it. The shape of this Imambara is almost same as the Imambara which I discovered at Fatehpur Sikri, capital of Akbar. It is number one, either late Akbar period or Jafri. So I will leave all the other details. So what I have told today is that there are certain practices through which the community is developing. Initially, those practices are being derived from other communities, but then there are spaces which we ignore because there is a certain other kind of terminology which is being used by our sources, and those examples still remain. बड़े इमामबाड़े में लखनऊ में जाके ये मत कहिएगा कि पहला है, और ये मत कहिएगा कि गोलकुंडा वाला बादशाही इमामबाड़ा पहला है. No, I have shown you that in your Delhi you have an Imambara, which is recorded as an Imambara. It is also recorded by Bashir Hassan Nurrais. Still in the legal documents, the papers are Imambara. Still the majlises are going on, but by the Sunni, not by the Shias, and that is why it was ignored. Right? So perhaps Tughlaq period Imambara is the first one, the earliest which survives. Even from the Mughal period in Akbar's capital, we do have, and both these Imambaras are almost of the same size, quite big. छोटे मोटे घर वाले नहीं थे, they were which had some patronage. There is much more to say in this. But I would refrain myself to do two things. One, that much time has been taken. Number two, I am still working on this paper, and I hope that I'll keep on looking at resources and would keep on adding to it. And perhaps by next year or next to next, I'll come up with a properly written paper. Thank you.
Before we move forward, I would like to make a few announcements. After the Q&A session and the felicitation ceremony, we would be inviting only our teachers and guest speakers for lunch due to unprecedented and unexpected crowd. We are really sorry for any inconvenience caused. The HOD sends her apologies that she will not be able to join us for lunch. As the Dean of Social Sciences, she has responsibilities at the convocation as well. But she will be joining us as soon as possible. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. I will first invite the question.
Q&A.
I will invite the question and focus question to each speaker. So first I would like to invite the question for the speaker. Yes. You introduce yourself as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Ramakrishna Dubey and I'm Ani Basuri. My question is to Sinha sir regarding the issue of weavers in the French region.
Regarding
Issue of weavers. Yes. Sir, so in that issue, you had, as I have studied the Assertion on the issue of weaver and the southeastern region of Coromandel coast of Chingle, Jagir, Salim district. So, in their studies, as they have mentioned that the exploitation by the Britishers led to the migration. But further, which you have provided that this was not the only reason. They have, the French also provided some incentive, extra incentives to them. Sir, my question is regarding that the means of advances and the mode of production, as you have categorized weaver as a producer. So, is there was also a change in the means of production and the means of advances in the labor, in the weaver and the French merchant relations, with reference to Britishers?
Any other question for Prof. Sinha?
Sir, I don't need the mic.
All right.
I mean, sir, thank you for your very wonderful and very enriching talk. One thing which fascinated me was, sir, you were mentioning a bit about the weavers' songs, isn't it? So, sir, are these songs, I mean, like, what kind of information do they contain? Like in fishermen's folk song, we find areas of different geographies coming into existence. So, do the weavers provide, I mean, you mentioned that they migrated overnight and such sorts of things happened just for a tobacco crisis, for taking into consideration. So, such kind of interesting amusement things, do they come into the questions?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I will try to answer both the questions. First of all, I will answer your question. That as far as the weavers songs are concerned, in fact, unfortunately, Vijay Ramaswamy, she has written a lot on that. She has worked a lot. And just before her death, about a week back, she talked to me and she said, I have gone to Tamil Nadu and I have gone to various places and collected certain material, but I don't, the work has not come out. And her husband Krishna was asking me to do the editing work, but that time, unfortunately, I was down with COVID. So it took a long time for me to come out of that. So, but she has worked on that. I don't know exactly what it contains. So I don't want to misguide people on that. Yeah, about your question, a very good, very pertinent question. When you are talking of Dr. Sathi's work, he has focused primarily on the English side of the weavers. What he has talked of the weavers and what he has talked of is about the English officials, the English attitudes, etc. He has not worked at all on the French side. And what I found in my work, that I never said that they migrated all the time. I said that towards the end of the 18th century, they were forced to come back because of the political power of the English. The English forced the local rulers, number one, to disallow them to make cloth for the French. And there are a lot of not litigation, but a lot of complaints about it. In fact, there is one, a group of merchants who had invested 10,000, they had invested 10 lakh pagodas for the making of the cloth. And that was, and the entire amount was going waste because the Nawab of Karnataka, earlier he was very close to the French weavers and all that because he was getting income from them. But towards the end, he found that the English pressure was too much and he was always siding with the English. So he stopped the weavers from making clothes for the French. And the weavers who had migrated to this region, in 1786, they were forced back to go back to the original territory, that is England. So these are certain examples where I find that I differ also from Parthasarathi, because Parthasarathi says that the wars did not contribute to the kind of decline of the weaving. Yes, it did not contribute to the decline in the English case, but it did impact the French textile industry a lot. Primarily because the French, after the abolition of the company, the private traders were finding it very difficult to reach to the weavers. The English adopted, especially around 1770s, adopted a policy of eliminating the merchants and dealing with the weavers directly, so that they can have complete control over production, which did not happen. Ultimately, they had to withdraw because of the protest of the weavers, and they did not get support from the higher authorities. But the English case is very different from the French case, which I found myself, according to my studies. I may be wrong, but what I found that in the case of weavers was different in the French. They were treated well and all that, but towards the end they could not sort of survive in French settlements due to constant wars. The coming of the Marathas, they were throughout the century they were attacked. The three wars, the so-called Karnataka wars, which got linked with the 7 Years' War towards the end. Then the American War of Independence also ruined the French textile industry. Every time they tried to come out of that, every war would lead to dispersal of the weavers into neighboring territories. And every time they would come back, another war or another crisis would take place. So if you can see from one figure that the population of Pondicherry was almost 1,30,000 in 1740s, and it came down to about 60,000 by the end of the 18th century. So this is my answer.
Is a question for the other two speakers? Yes. Or
good afternoon, sir. My name is Santosh Kumar, PhD College, University of Delhi. Sir, I have two very small questions for Bahuguna sir. First of all, sir, you talked about the centrality of the figure of Kabir in this whole discourse. So, were there any differences in the way Kabir Panthis appropriate Kabir, Dadu Panthi appropriated Kabir, the Ramnathis appropriated Kabir, and the Bairagis appropriated Kabir? That's one small question. And second is, you talked about the element of caste dynamics. What were the gender dynamics in these all things? Where was the position of this?
Repeat this question. Second question. Gender dynamics.
Okay. You talked about the caste dynamics. What was the gender dynamics? Where were the position of women in this whole thing?
yeah. Please.
Hello, sir. Thank you for this wonderful panel.
Because I'm sorry, I'll forget the questions.
ठीक है,
You,
ठीक है, ठीक है.
I'll give short answers, then you can ask your question. I'm sorry. You see, coming to the first question, you see, we usually tend to think that these Panthic formations like Kabir Panth, Dadu Panth, Rezavis were formed, during the lifetimes or immediately after the death of the original sons. If you look at the literature, it's very clear that there is very little evidence to indicate the presence of these structured formations before the 18th century. I am of the opinion that once the Bairagi community disintegrated because of what S.Z.H did, and once a clear division was made between the Ramanandis and the Bairagis, I think the followers of these sons then, were scattered, and then I think they went to different regions and formed these panths. So, for instance, there is no evidence for Kabir Panth before 18th century. And Bijak, which is regarded as the picture of the Kabir Panth, is the first available manuscript of Bijak is available only from early 19th century, 1801, as Linda has pointed out. 1801, first manuscript of Bijak. No, but there is a doubt about it, because you see the Kabir Panthis claim. They claim. It is their claim. But other scholars do not act. Because they say that the Bijak was stolen by one of Kabir's followers and it was preserved in a particular Kabir Panthi monastery. But if you go to Kabir Chowk, you do not find any 17th or 18th century manuscripts. You only find 19th century manuscripts. I have been there many times. There is nothing of the period before 19th century. So I think, yes, so that is why the image of Kabir in these Panthic formations is very different. For instance, if you see the Chhattisgarhi branch of Kabir Panth, which is the most prominent branch today and which is very popular because they have a very wide popular base among the lower caste, which is also called Dhanadasi branch. It is interesting that they represent Kabir as a kind of Puranic figure who is sitting over Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. And they are subordinated to his authority. So that is a later development. So coming to your second question about gender relations in Bhakti poetry, plenty of work has been done on this by scholars. You would be knowing some of these prominent scholars who have in the last 3 decades have worked on gender relations in medieval Bhakti. You have Vijay Ramaswamy, you have Parita Mukta, you have Kumkum Sangari and many others who have worked on this. My take is this, that if Ramanandi, if Barghat says that Ramanandi brought about a minor social revolution in the 16th century and 17th century, I think he had a valid point because there were many women who were very active. In fact, in Bhaktamal, Navadas's Bhaktamal, which is a Ramanandi text, you will be surprised that you have hundreds of women devotees mentioned. Hundreds of them. They were real historical figures, characters. They are real historical figures. And see the way he describes Meera. It is very different from the modern Gandhian or other kind of images of Meera. Meera is a very harmless, liberal, Vaishnava woman. It's very different. Meera is celebrated because she questions the Rajput patriarchal norms. She rejects the patriarchal culture of her family, and that is why she is popular between Meera and Kabir in the way they both are treated by Navadas. So I think medieval Vaishnavism, whether it is branches such as Pushtimarg, Gaudiya Sampradaya, Ramanandi Sampradaya, or it is open Vaishnava categories like Bairagis, they all provided space to the women, without, of course, questioning the basic patriarchal norms. So within the framework of patriarchy, we find women playing a role. I mean, in Pushtimarg, for instance, in 84 Vaishnavan ki Varta, and in 252 Vaishnavan ki Varta, you find at least 70 to 80 women playing important role in the propagation of Pushtimarg. So I think some work has to be done on this. Some has already been done. Scholars are working. Thank you.
We talk about lunch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any question for Nadeem?
One small question.
Professor Farooqi also. Professor Farooqi. Professor Farooqi.
Sir, please you go first. Sir, please you go first.
I am a little puzzled by the location. Not exactly puzzled. I mean, I think the way in which your community would have interacted. The fact that the location of the Paharganj is at a considerable distance from most of the locations where the monuments are from. So, I mean, that location is something which interests me.
Well, Professor Ahmad Farooqi, thank you for your question. I was also in the impression that perhaps this is an area where, in Paharganj area, one might not find any tool of knowledge. But then, if you read or see any of these works by Bashir Hassan or by Zafar Hassan or actually the recent works by that association which is looking after the monuments these days. Exactly. I mean, they have also compiled a book. You would realize that around this particular building, there is a complex of Tughlaq buildings. There is a Tughlaq mosque. There was a gateway near to it which got demolished due to rains only in this January. Just at a walking distance is a monument where you have Qadam Rasool, which again is Tughlaq. So there are a number of. I was thinking that you might ask that it is a place which is not associated with the Shias. No, it is not. It is a place where there is a dominance of the Sunnis, and it is the Sunni community which is commemorating these. And perhaps the argument of my paper is that ultimately it is these communities, whatever the Sunnis are doing and whatever Sufis are thinking about, they are being taken up, absorbed by this emerging community. And by 18th century, all those things which were being done by almost all the Muslims, whether Sunni, Hanafi or Sufi or this and that, ultimately came to rest only with this particular community known as the Shias. That is the type of arguments I am making. By the way, I take this opportunity because I got the mic once again in my hand. And that is that the name which was announced perhaps was a little wrong. I am not Nadeem Ali Rezavi at all. I am Ali Nadeem Rezavi. And
Syed Prof. Syed. Just I will use my presidential prerogative and I will take a very short period of time, but I will exercise my privilege. So thank you very much. we had interesting presentation, very substantial presentation, and that will open up the avenues for further research. I will only say one by one that it is possible to retrieve the voices of the weavers from the French records, as we have been doing in the 1857. We are trying to retrieve the voices of leaders. So if this is possible, then we can have a larger perspective. We have the experiences of the weaving community throughout India, almost the same. The producers are the buyers are different, they are advancing the money. But what is the perception of the weavers of that Coromandel Corps? Can we retrieve their voices from the colonial French record or not? My only question, submission to Bahuguna is that so far all the some literature, modern literature, has not been edited properly. There is no discussion on the menstruology. We keep on talking about this Vaishnav, Doso Bhava Santo Varta. We keep on talking about Bhaktiman, but there is no critically edited volume of any of these texts. So perhaps an over-reliance on this type of bibliographical literature and comparing it with the other bibliographical literature where there has been substantial work on this subject. Perhaps it has to wait till critically edited and methodology-based studies have come up for the some literature and for the modern literature. Nadeem, this theme is very well taken. That goes without saying, although he has made references to Sufis in a very respectful manner, and also even to Hanafis. See, the commemoration of Karbala has been a part of the cultural past of Indian Muslims as well as the Muslims throughout the world. The only thing is that the Iranian Safvid state tried to appropriate the tragedy of Karbala and Shiism at its own. And therefore there is a denouncement by the Safids of all the Sufi past. Safids have the origin from Shaykh Safiuddin al-Zaberi, a famous Sufi. But then from the time of Shah Abbas and Shah Ahmad, they don't talk about Safi past. So they are erasing, trying to erase the Sufi past from Iran. The same thing is almost repeated in our when Maulvi Sayyid Dildar Ali tried to introduce that no, Sufis are doing, Sunnis are doing only the commemoration. It is Tawalla. So he said that unless it is combined with the Tabarra, the acquisition, it is not complete. So therefore, it tried to make the identity consolidated that unless the leader in the Tabarra, the commemoration of Imam Husain is not complete. And that is the big dividing line between Sufis, Sunnis and Shia. So perhaps this element is an important element in understanding how the Safids first in Iran tried to eradicate the Sufi past, and then the Nawabi state of ours tried to eradicate the Sufi past in the same manner, to consolidate the Shia identity as a separate identity which includes for Tawassul, Tabarra as well. So this is the question. But there are images written from the time of Shaykh Muhammad Chishti to all the time. There are references of the Tasbih, there are references of the thing in the Sufi Khalqas. In the Sufi Khalqas there are all these things. So, but all these things are been trying to be appropriated by Muhammad Musalmans later on in a different manner. Thank you.
Unfortunately, the presidential remarks cannot be answered.
Like the Prime Minister.
Keep them in our hearts.
Thank you, Professor and Jafri sir, for your critical analysis and the elaborate views. Now, I end the session and I would like to invite Professor Rezavi to participate as speaker and chair.
बाहर से
I would like to make a couple of announcements before we move to lunch. Front row exit is only meant for our teachers and guest speakers. Students are requested to please use the back door.